you and I both know, because we've been through a couple of these cycles in our lives. Real estate is cyclical. All asset prices are cyclical. At some point, winter is coming. I've got my little, ice walker here from Game of Thrones. And I have this on my desk just to remind myself, don't get too high on the hog, keep debt at zero, keep the savings high, because winter is coming at some point. I don't ever want to be in 2009 again, where I was living on a couch, because now I got a family. I can't live on a couch and call it I call it an adventure.
You need a bigger couch.
Yeah, much bigger couch. So, what's your plan for the next downturn? Whether it's next month, next year, next decade, they keep printing money and the downturn doesn't come for 20 years until it's a real downturn. What's the plan to weather the storm when you've got, 3,000 units and I don't know what your leverage percentage is, but what's the downturn plan?
Well, yeah, and that's the problem with downturns is no one knows when they're actually going to show up, right? I mean, I know people who in 2015 and 16 said, all right, prices are too high. I'm getting out. I'm going to sit here and wait until they come back down.
Yeah.
Well, that's 6 years ago.
Yeah. Right? Six years ago, and a 50% increase in value on assets.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it's funny, you can't quite see it because of the angle, but that framed picture behind me also says winter is coming. So that's something we're always keeping in mind. So the problem is you don't know when it's coming, right? And like you said, it will, but you don't know when. And also, our government lately seems to be unwilling to have any kind of economic, downturn whatsoever. It's just, we've got to keep it up all the time. So there's kind of what is that? That's the unknown, right? What kind of reaction is going to happen to any kind of downturn? But given that, the worst thing you can do is just say, I'm going to sit on the sidelines and not do anything, because especially with inflation coming, probably the best way to hedge against inflation is to own hard assets like real estate, right? So, okay, well, how do I hedge against inflation, own hard assets, but then also hedge against, recession or a downturn, or what if prices come down? And it comes down to, a handful of things, but two of the biggest ones is, number one, make sure you have sufficient cash flow to weather a storm. And then two, proper use of debt, matching debt with the business plan, right? So you mentioned our current portfolio. I think our current LTV is probably 35%.
Please, that's huge. Please explain to people what you're talking about when you say LTV and 30%, because that's amazing, by the way.
So what that means is for every $100 million of real estate, there's $35 million in debt against it. Is basically what that means. So our loan to value, that ratio is roughly 35% on the existing properties. Now, when we buy a property, we typically go in at 70 or 75% because it's called value add, meaning we're gonna renovate, we're gonna do some different things, bump up rents, so that the idea is after you do that value add, you have a lower basis in the property and a higher cash flow. And that's how you get to a position of 35% overall leverage, right? So going in, we're usually 70 to 75%. I see a lot of deals being done nowadays at 80%. That's a little high for my comfort level. Again, I'm not, it can work out fine, and it has been. That's not our preference, is to go that high.
So just so I make sure I understand this, on this next deal you're putting together, let's say the next deal is $40 million. You're going to raise 30% down. So you'll get $12 million down. So now you owe $28 million on this $40 million asset. And in your mind, through value adds to the property, increase in rents, lowering the property, the property maintenance costs, or just the overall expenses, your goal is hey, through the manipulation of the denominator and the numerator, getting incomes up and expenses down, we're going to make this property intrinsically worth $50 million. And so now we have an asset that's worth $50 million. We bought it for 40 with 12% down. So now we owe $28 million on a $50 million property. And now our LTV is closer to 55% instead of 75%. So it's not that you're taking extra money to pay down the loan. You're just adding value and taking the tailwind of appreciation. And now all of a sudden you only owe in your portfolio $35 million per 100 million owned. Am I conceptualizing this correctly?
Exactly. So what we're doing is we're going in with what we feel like is moderate leverage, 70 to 75%. Now I know some operators that like to go into 60, 65. And if you have a low enough cost of equity, that's great. You can do that. We like to go in with 70 to 75, knowing that we're going to put some work into it, and that 2 years later, we should have a property that's significantly, that we have forced appreciation on. And then now our leverage is down to where, a lower level. The other piece of it is, I mentioned structure, and you're right. This won't be a rapid fire, but I'll try to make it quick. So going back to that, the $50 million deal we bought in March, when we went under contract on that, it was late December 2020. And when we applied for the loan, it was January 2021. That was still a very uncertain environment in terms of the economy and COVID and all of that. So what we did to make sure that to structure the debt properly in case a recession or downturn came, and there's a million ways to structure the debt. This is just an example to kind of illustrate it. So we got 12-year fixed rate Fannie Mae debt, right? So we know that if interest rates go up, it is not going to affect that property for 12 years because we have a fixed rate of 3.79% for 12 years. Like, it doesn't matter what happens. Our interest rate on that loan is 3.79 for 12 years, right? So we have that. Also, with a 12-year Fannie Mae loan, you can get two supplementals. And what the supplemental is, if you go to the single family world, you get your first mortgage, the value of your property goes up, you can go get a second mortgage or a HELOC, right? Or something like that. In the commercial world, the equivalent is a supplemental. You can go back to Fannie Mae and say, hey, the value is way up. I want to pull some cash out. And you can return it to investors. You can put it on a new roof, whatever you want to do with that. So that loan allows us to do that twice. Now, our business model is to sell in 6 years. So here's where all that comes into play. When you're buying a property, you always want to say, what are the potential outcomes, good or bad? So let's say we get to 6 years from now, and let's just say interest rates are way up, right? If someone was going to go get a loan, they'd have to pay 6% interest. Well, our loan is assumable, meaning that the buyer could take over our loan and they get to pay 3.79% for the next 6 years of the remainder of that loan. So by allowing a new buyer by guaranteeing that a new buyer of our property will pay no more than 3.79%, that helps protect the value of our property because our buyer doesn't have to come in with more expensive debt. Now, the downside of that assumption is, well, what if the property's worth $70, $80 million? Now they have to bring a ton of equity. Well, that costs too, right? That's where the supplemental comes in. They can use that supplemental to get back up to 75%. So we get the best of both worlds. They can get full moderate leverage at 75% and take over our low interest rate of 3.79. So in a high interest rate environment, we still have a good exit. What if it goes the other way? What if interest rates somehow are way lower in 6 years when we want to sell? And someone's like, I don't want that loan. It's 3.7. I can get it for 2.5. So what that means in that situation, we go to sell is we're gonna have to pay off that loan. We will pay. It's called yield maintenance, but it's effectively a prepayment penalty. But if interest rates are that much lower in 6 years, that also means it's extremely likely that cap rates are going to be way lower in 6 years. And if cap rates are way lower, that means the value of our property is way higher than we were planning. And we'll be more than happy to pay that prepayment penalty because there'll be so much extra profit from the sale of the property, right? So in either way, we win when we want to exit in 6 years.